Okay, I'm sharing some information that might be useful out there at this time. So normally I look at astrology and stuff like that, and Faster EFT, tapping, and all sorts of things, and Carl Jung. And one thing I did was Pete Walker. A few years ago, I bought a book called Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving. I came from childhood trauma myself, and the thing is that there's a lot of behaviors that we pick up that are not useful to us in life, but we're very much programmed. And in order to have a good life, we need to resolve stuff within ourselves. But we start attracting people that are better suited to us, that resonate with us. But sometimes we're stuck in situations and that are not healthy, which we will work our way out of as we develop and grow. But sometimes we're in decent, circumstances, but we get out of control with our fight, flight, freeze response. So this is just information for people out there who are in generally, quite a loving relationship or friendship or whatever it is, and you want to start, as Pete Walker says, tools for lovingly resolving conflict. So we're in a time where there's going to be a lot more conflict because we've got the social distancing going on, and we've also got, where people are having to self-isolate because of, being maybe thinking they've got the virus or that they have got the virus, and all sorts of, it's causing a lot of trauma, basically. I've got my own story on that. I had the virus, it lasted 30 days. I'm saying the virus, a virus, whatever it was really heavy duty, and one can only assume that the virus is the virus that's going around that shut down the whole world, and 3 billion of us are, having to sort of self-isolate, or not all self-isolate, but just, not living our normal daily lives. So hopefully this is going to be useful. I'm going to put the link below in the video, and this is something that you can do if you've got complex PTSD. Then you've got a list to the left, which are complex PTSD articles. It's very difficult when people have come from trauma, because a lot of the memories are implicit memories, and we don't really, we're just reacting out of the past, and sometimes our reactions are somewhat valid, but at this time, this is a good tip for people that want to resolve conflict, and many of us do. Some of us are in conflicting situations that are being caused by another, then that's not very helpful or kind. But again, we've got to grow and evolve whatever we're in. So, tools for lovingly resolving conflict. And Pete Walker says, I won't read the whole thing, but he says this is a list of techniques and perspectives that he has gathered over the years to help couples resolve conflict as lovingly as possible. So he explains that there. And then he says you can clearly read this. If you click on the link below, you're going to be able to sit and read it, or stop the video and read it. You can do that too. So he's got a list of 22 things here, which are very useful to look into. But before I do that, I'm going to explain, when we do get into conflict with people, it's best to have timeouts and create a timeout and an agreement. And actually, I've listened to a lot of Jordan Peterson's work, and he said that he does this with his wife, that you have a timeout and then you resume. You choose when you're going to resume. The worst thing we can do when we are having a conflict with somebody is to have the conflict with somebody we love and then not agree to a time of resuming. So it's really important that if you go into a flashback, or you're having a bad moment, you say, I'm feeling this right now. And you might flip for a little while, but then you say, we're going to come back and speak about this in 24 hours or in 48 hours or whatever it is. We mustn't leave each other just out in the dark and the cold. It's not fair, particularly at this time, because life is precious and we don't know how long we have got on earth. We don't have to be afraid of that, but this is the reality. And it's better, there's an old saying, don't go to bed angry. Now, sometimes that's not so straightforward, because when we're interacting with somebody else, there's a lot more at stake and a lot more going on. But he does say here, 2 of the most common reasons that relationships break up is irreconcilable damages and irreparable damages. The latter could have been prevented in many cases. If couples knew how to use timeouts, then this is true for trauma survivors who, when flashing back, can easily lose control to the outer critic and say all kinds of deeply wounding things to each other. Survivors need to learn to recognize the signs of being activated and take timeouts to stop the bleeding caused by a critic on the rampage. Things can be said in the heat of activation that can wound and deeply and engrave themselves in the psyche of others in deeply trust-destroying ways. Deeply trust-destroying ways. So much of this needless intimacy destruction will be prevented in both members of the couple agree that each of them can call a timeout whenever they feel too triggered to be lovingly confrontive or are experiencing the other as flashing back into being overly aggressive. So we've got to learn about ourselves. And he says here that timeouts can range from 1 minute to 24 hours, depending on how long it takes for either or both partners to achieve good enough flashback management. Timeouts work best when the person calling them nominates a time to resume conflict resolution, so that they're not becoming techniques for dodging issues. So timeouts are not a way to avoid issues. We can say, look, I can't deal with this right now. Can we speak about this later in the day? But this is maturing and growing up, and this is part of our evolution. And particularly for those of us that have been through trauma, the more we get to know ourselves, the more we can watch when we go into flashback. Like now I know when I'm having a flashback or when somebody irritates me or words that hurt me or places. So I'm more mindful about what I put myself, in. He also says about transference, which I think is very good to read. And he says, he says, in using this list with couples, I have noticed that those who become most sophisticated around conflict resolution have achieved a significant skill with steps 19 through to 21. These steps are about learning to handle transference for trauma survivors. Transference is often a type of flashback whereby we see our significant others through the lens of our early caretakers, and by which we project onto them a great deal of our unresolved emotional pain. As such, a partner's minor complaint might trigger a cauldron of rage, fear, and or shame left over from decades of mothers scolding and rejecting criticism, or a failure to say what we were hoping to hear may stir up the pain of decades of an aloof, detached father's neglect. The comparison of most conflicts that I witnessed in my office, this is Pete Walker saying this, eventually proved to be 90% re-experienced pain from the past and only 10% from what is actually happening in the now. Said more simply, conflict flashes individual back in a way that makes them emotionally unconsciously view their partners as if they are their abusive, neglectful parents. Harville Hendricks' Getting the Love You Want is a wonderful guide for not only working through, this. That's a book, so I'll put the link below that as well. Let me see. Harville Hendricks' Getting the Love That You Want. It's on Audible as well. I'll put the link below the video. So then you can finish reading the article, but then go back and look at this. And if you have a partner and you do love them and you do care about them, print this off, discuss it and, get together, because particularly if it's quite a loving relationship, we need to nurture it in order for it to grow. And often these conversations that are not had need to be had in order for people to understand each other. And we can even do this with friends. I recently said to a friend, if we fall out, we'll take 24 hours out, particularly during this time, because, people are precious, and people that do love us. And, as I say, there are some hard relationships in this world, but we will outgrow those as we heal ourselves. So look at on the left here, you can see, flashback management, codependency, fawn response, shrinking the inner critic, shrinking the outer critic, abandonment, depression, emotional neglect, grieving, and complex PTSD. The 4 Fs, which is fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and then 13 steps for managing flashbacks. Click on that. So this is a brilliant tool if you go into flashbacks, and you can print off a PDF. I'm leaving it there, and I'll put the links below, but if anybody out there needs a bit of chat or a hand with understanding some of these things, I will put my mentoring below the page, I'm not a qualified doctor or anything like that, but I do, or psychotherapist or anything. But I've been through trauma and I understand it, and I've done a lot of study in Carl Jung's work and also PTSD, complex PTSD. I've spoken to Pete Walker 3 times as well. He's a wonderful man. He helped me on 3 occasions. I booked appointments with him over the phone. So again, you know, there's a lot of tools out there. So, you know, look after yourself. And I'm here, currently dropped my rates so that people can access me through this period of self-isolation. Okay, hope that's helpful. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back with some more in the next few days. Thank you.